Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're excited to present yet another New Hampshire Small Business Development Center webinar. It has been a year plus of them, and we're looking forward to this one that is totally on cybersecurity. We have a speaker, Jake Blacksten, who is, as you can see on your screen, he is from the Delaware Small Business Development Center, and we have had the privilege of partnering with them in their Data Assured program, and we have been able to work with them for our cybersecurity initiative. Julie Demers from the New Hampshire the New Hampshire Tech Alliance is on as well today. And she and her team are working with us as partners on our cybersecurity initiative, presenting at least one webinar a month for a few months. This month you get two. We have this one today, and then the next one is on March 17th. March 17th. We're in May 17th. And it is on identifying cyber risk, and will be presented by Ryan Robinson at Mainstay Technologies, which is who was on our prior webinar. So you get to meet him there. So Jake is very instrumental in this program, and he will give you a little bit more background on himself. But he is the cybersecurity guy that we are relying on, and he is done a great job with helping to get our team up to date and up to speed on this. And we look forward to him sharing this information with you as well. We will be recording this. We are recording this. Please stay on mute, and then Jake is totally willing to answer questions. Please drop them in the chat, and between all of us who are on, we will manage getting him those questions, and hopefully there'll be a little time at the end too. So thank you for joining us, and Jake.
All right, thank you. It is my pleasure to speak with all of you today. As Heidi had mentioned, I'm a digital solutions manager here for the Delaware SBDC. So I manage all of our cybersecurity programs, and thus in our partnership, what we offer now to New Hampshire. The Data Assured program is a turnkey solution to cybersecurity. And so today's presentation is really going to go over all of the basics of everything that we have built and what's offered to you guys as small businesses on New Hampshire's website. There's a bunch of one-pagers and everything that I will go over. My background is in so cybersecurity is a catch-all term. Cybersecurity there's a lot of different areas, just like there is in any other science. My background is in digital forensics. So I specialize in the investigation of cybersecurity crimes versus typically someone who would be more in incident response, who is the one putting out fires in cybersecurity and so on and so forth. But with that, I built this program in mind for the small business because my background is in more of the corporate world. And I realized that in the corporate world, they were spending millions of dollars to protect things that really small businesses, if they just took just a sliver of what they would spend, could really prevent some major breaches. So that's what this program is built on. And without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive right in. There we go. So the importance of cybersecurity, why a small business should actually care. So you've got the main one, which is data breaches can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. They cost millions of dollars for corporate businesses, but for smaller businesses, it can cost, I had one client that it was about $30,000 to recover all of their data. And who has $30,000 when they're starting a business to just recover what they've already gotten? So it's a big inconvenience and a big price tag, and most people know that. So that's why we tend to tell that. But the other things that we think about in cybersecurity are your brand gets really tarnished in the event of a data breach. you have to go out and tell your customers that their information was stolen, it really doesn't look kindly on you as a business, because they don't necessarily think that you were protecting their data adequately enough, which you very well could have been. Everybody's going to get breached at some point. It's just it's nature of the beast. And then a small business is usually a stepping stone into a larger organization. If anyone remembers the Target data breach back a few years ago, that was done by an HVAC system company. It just happened to be the portal in which Target used for their managing of their service providers just happened to have so it was a little bit of Target's issue, because their portal kind of back into their actual systems. However, it was an HVAC system's account information that was leaked through phishing that ultimately allowed that attacker into Target's main system. So that's why small businesses usually a much bigger target, because you have less protocols, less technical procedures in place to prevent these types of attacks, and ultimately are linked into larger organizations. And then you also have regulatory requirements. Each state has some type of data breach law. Here we call it the House Bill 180. New Hampshire has something slightly different. It is actually detailed. It's not actually in any of my slides, but if you go through some of the workbook material that I'll reference today, it's actually specialized in there or called out in there. So you can just go to New Hampshire's website on their cybersecurity side, download that content, and it's all right there for you. And so that's why it's so important for small businesses. And in the event of a data breach, most small businesses that I consult on typically go out of business. That's because they couldn't get their data back. They couldn't rebuild their brand. They didn't have the money to do either of those two. So it's time consuming, and if you can prevent it, why not? However, I'm also going to teach you how to mitigate that, or at least mitigate the fact that if you are in a breach, that you can quickly recover so you don't spend days or weeks down. So the Data Assured program has a bunch of different things in it. It's got our Claim to Fame, which is our cyber workbook that is available on New Hampshire's website. It also has our cybersecurity one-pagers and some other nice content that we provide to all SBDCs and thus client-facing, such as yourself. And in the event that you do have a data breach and you need support, Delaware, along with New Hampshire, is always here for you as a small business. So some learning objectives. Based on this presentation, we want you to really understand and get the knowledge behind cybersecurity and why it's important, and then understand how to implement it in your small business. I'm going to take this, this is more of an assumption, but I'm going to assume that most of you small businesses are smaller in scale and range from probably just a single business owner to maybe 10 employees, which is a lot of the people that I consult with. It's very rare that I get people come to me that have larger employees, because at that point they transition to actual IT companies or they hire it within and they manage it themselves. But also need to be able to identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. That is something I will tell you about in the next slide, but remember those 5 strong pillars and knowledge of tools and resources that are available to you. And one of the one-pagers that we do have, it's called Cyber Solutions, and that Cyber Solutions page actually has anywhere between 3 to 4 different companies in multiple different areas, such as VPNs, data encryption, backups, all those types of software that you might need to help protect you. So all of this is built around, the whole framework is built around the NIST cybersecurity framework. So the NIST cybersecurity framework is basically your 5 pillars: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So as a business, excuse me, you need to be able to identify all of the data that you're collecting. You need to identify all of the resources that you utilize as well, such as devices and so on. You need to know where all of that is, and then you step into protection. How do you protect all of that? How do you protect the data from getting leaked? How do you protect the devices from theft or online theft? And then detect. hopefully you can implement, not hopefully, but you should be able to implement procedures that actually are constantly detecting these threats before they even happen. So this is what we call about antivirus, anti-malware, those types of things that can mitigate the actual threat. And then respond. You need to be able to respond in the event of a data breach. You need to be able to be as swift and quick about it as possible. And then recover. So in the event that you've responded and you've gotten them out of your system, how do you actually recover, build your brand back up? How do you actually get back to your day-to-day operations? So step one, identify who, what, where, and when. So with identifying, you need to know why do this. So identifying the threat is the most fundamental part in protecting against it. Specifically identifying all the pieces that make up your network that are susceptible to attacks gives you the advantage you need to protect and or recover. And then who is responsible for cyber? So who makes the calls when it comes to cybersecurity of your company? Chances are it's a business owner that is filling in this workbook, going through the workbook that is available to you. But there are some cases that you actually have a cybersecurity lead, or you have somebody in your company that has some type of cybersecurity background or is managing it for you. Maybe you have external IT, but then that person becomes the responsible party. And then outside consultants. Is there anyone outside the small business that you might be able to turn to help you enact some of these protections or help you kind of understand some of the things that you need? SBCs are one of them. We're here to help you with all of that and identify possible resources, but you also might have other businesses that you could leverage, or maybe legal representation or things like that, because most lawyers or attorneys are well-versed in the cyber data breach laws that are out there as well. And then prioritization. You need to be able to prioritize the data once you've identified it to determine which data or which systems need to come back up before any others in order to continue your day-to-day operations. So first step in identifying is you need to know what hardware you have. So a hardware inventory is very important. I've been in many of larger businesses that can't they've got hundreds, maybe thousands of computers, mobile devices, all that's out there, and they don't have proper tracking mechanisms. So they don't necessarily know where any of their devices are at any given time. You as a small business have an advantage as far as you might only have 2 computers. You might only have one that does everything for you, or maybe you only have 2 or 3 employees and they have maybe an iPad or an iPhone or Android device, whatever. And so you kind of know where all of that is, but you need to make sure that if it accesses company data, that you know what device it is and where it is. And then the second thing is the operating system check. You need to know what operating systems are actually on those systems. For example, if you're using Windows 7, please update to Windows 8 or higher. Windows 7 is no longer supported from a security perspective. They end that about a year ago now. So you want to make sure that you have at least Windows 8 or newer. For Macs, they support the last 3 operating systems. So we are, I believe it's the operating system right after High Sierra, and I can't for the life of me think of that name right now, but they support the last 3. So make sure that you have at least the latest operating system for Mac as well. Same goes for iOS devices and Android devices as well. You need to know what operating systems are there and which ones are still being supported. And then software check. Just like operating systems, you need to make sure that you're running the latest and greatest software as well. This is antivirus software, your QuickBooks software, your if you have a CRM that's local to your machine, that type of software, literally any software that is installed on your computer that links to the internet, that need to be updated. And why that's so important, we'll go over in a little bit as to why updates are important. But for the software, you need to identify what version you're at so you know which versions are continuously supported. And then asset management. So we talk about hardware inventory. So you've inventoried all of your hardware, but now we need to actually manage it. So how do you implement some type of software, even if it's just an Excel spreadsheet where it has all of your hardware, all of its operating systems, what versions they are, and who actually has it, and where it's supposed to be located. If it's a mobile device, obviously it's traveling a lot, but at least knowing who is responsible for protecting that, as far as maybe it's Joe from accounting, I don't know. But knowing that it's assigned to them and that person is now the manager of that asset. And then a technology usage policy. By this, we mean just a policy on how any of your devices, anything that links to any of your data, so anything that has business data on it needs to have some type of technology usage policy for your employees. So how you should appropriately use the devices, and in order to save you from any type of legal action you may come across in the event that you do have a data breach. For example, I had a client once who was hacked and then was actually sued by some of those customers because of their data was leaked. And they did not have a technology usage policy. So the employee that actually was the vulnerable part to that didn't have, the company didn't have any backbone to say, well, they were acting outside of our usage policy. They didn't have any of that. So the technology usage policy is more to save the small business, to say that these were the protocols and procedures the employee was supposed to handle, and they didn't. And so because of that, that led to a data breach. And in the event that because they did not act in accordance with our policy, that's why we got breached. So just having that is a more from a legal action, but also a safety net for you as well. And then understanding where you are in the supply chain. For example, if you are a manufacturer or are maybe you create products or services for larger companies, if you have any type of portal access into any of these larger companies, knowing that and being aware of what those companies are and those policies and procedures that are in place from the larger organization that you have to follow in order to make sure that in case someone phishes you specifically and then uses your login to get into the larger company, you have that, you're aware that you will be a target in that event. Then step 2, protect. This is one of the larger sections of the 2. What are you protecting? The 4 or 5, sorry. Identity management. So identity management is what we basically, every username and password combination for all of your accounts, that's an identity. So we recommend that you have an identity that is unique to each login prompt that you have. So if you've got QuickBooks Online, you've got 3 different banking accounts, you've got your CRM, you've got all of these different things. All of them theoretically should have their own separate logins with their own unique passwords. We understand that small businesses, you guys have to manage a lot, so it becomes difficult, especially you have to remember all of these passwords. And then when I get into the password creation, you're going to realize that if you're going to mandate all of these requirements for passwords, it's going to be so difficult to manage any of those. That's why we actually recommend in the Cyber Solutions putting in a password manager to help manage your identity. So that way it helps you auto log into things, so you don't need to know the passwords to everything. Then inactive device locking. This is very important because if you just leave your laptop up all of the time, that means that even if you had a login for your laptop or your desktop or whatever, it's up all the time. So someone could theoretically break your physical barriers and get whatever they needed because you didn't lock them appropriately. And so by default, Windows does this. I believe it's 3 to 5 minutes of inactivity. It'll auto lock. All phones do this by default. Leaving that by default is fine. But if you're changing your settings to never lock, that is an issue. I see this a lot in restaurants when they're sharing the point of sale system. Maybe it's on your phone or something, and they change it to never lock because multiple people need to use it. They don't want to give up their password and so on and so forth. And that becomes an issue because you're sharing that. And what happens if that gets into the wrong hands? Then that person has direct access to your point of sale system, direct access to all of your customer data, all of that right in that device because it never locks. Multi-factor authentication. So this is basically whenever you get your text message or have to use that fancy app with the 6-digit rotating codes on it, we highly recommend that you put this on any device or any login part or anything that you can think of. This, if you have to use the same password, which I completely do not recommend, but if you have to because it's easier for you, at least put on 2-factor, so that way you're at least having some type of code that's generated after your login, so it authenticates you as you. And then employee training. So this is very important, especially with the #1 attack method, which is phishing. We highly recommend that you would train all of your employees on phishing, because phishing every month, every day, gets more and more complicated and complex and is tricking more people. I mean, I'm pretty well versed in how phishing works and looking at all of the emails and stuff, but there are some that do almost get me because it might change a letter. And if you're reading something really fast, you just don't notice. A big thing that was a couple of years ago was people were spoofing Comcast, and instead of spelling Comcast.net or Comcast.com with an M, they were putting 2 N's next to each other. And if you were reading it real fast, you would have never known. And it said at Comcast.net, and that's who it's supposed to come from. But if you would have read it really closely, you would have noticed it was N's, not M's. So that's why we recommend training. And then protect which is creating your passwords. So passwords are very, I still use the word term password. We are supposed to say passphrase because it's supposed to be this long phrase that you're supposed to use. As you can see in my steps, you're supposed to take something that is relatively unique to you or something that is a bunch of words, eliminate the spaces, and then change out the characters, some characters for uppercase, some lowercase, some numbers, some symbols. And so that way it's easier for you to remember. Back in the lab that I used to work out of in New York, a lot of our security experts would do this. They had some really, really long passwords, like I'm telling you, at least 30 characters long. And they remembered them because they were a phrase. And they didn't get too complex as this example in #3 is with all of the different things. Just changing out a few here and there where you'll always know that's what you changed out. That's all you need to do. And then complexity is always less than length. So supercomputers, they generate, I mean, we're getting faster and more intelligent. So complexity to it is great, but if you've only got a 6-character password and it's super complex, it's got uppercase, lowercase, digits, all that nonsense in there, that's great. But then a supercomputer has to do so many different combinations for a 6-digit passcode. But imagine you do that and you have a 14-character password. Then you've just quadrupled, well, actually more than quadrupled the outcomes that the supercomputer has to generate in order to break that kind of code. So that's why we always say length is better than actual complexity. And this little GIF that's happening is a few years old now, so those years don't necessarily add up because supercomputers have become significantly faster since then. But you can see the transition as you add more letters and you add more characters. It does take a supercomputer significantly more amount of time to go through that. And so what needs to be in a passphrase? And there's 5 things. One is you need at least 3 of the 4, which is uppercase, lowercase, numbers, or symbols. You should change your password as often as 180 days. This one is a little bit more geared to government agencies and more of the corporations that have actual protocols in place to help remind people automatically versus everybody just doing this on their own. If you have unique passwords to every login information, you don't have to do the change frequency as often, because if someone actually if an attacker actually gets access to that password, it's, I mean, that's it. They only have access to that one piece of information, which is, I mean, depending what the information is, it's not good, but it means that they can't go anywhere else. Length, we recommend at least 12 characters in length because, again, supercomputers are faster now. We used to recommend 8 last year, so you can see a significant change. We said you needed to add 4 more digits just in a year, so who knows what happens a year from now. We might be recommending 16. Lockout, we recommend that like your iPhones do it automatically. I'm pretty sure Android devices do it as well, that after so many failed attempts, it locks you out for a time period. If you can put that on your laptops and desktops, that is recommended as well. Depending on the sensitivity of the data, you can also on iPhones and Androids set your phone to wipe after so many failed attempts. That is only for very, very secure information and you have backups. I don't recommend putting that feature on if you don't have backups of the data that's on your phone. And then don't reuse your passwords. I say don't reuse them at all. However, if you have to use a password because it's just easier for you, don't reuse. You need them to be in at least a 6 password cycle. So after you've changed your password 6 times, then you can reuse that one, assuming that you change them every 180 days. If you're changing them every month, it's we still don't recommend that you do it. You use the 6th password from them. Something that we do recommend clients do is if you go to this website, it's called haveibeenpwned.com. We can put that in the chat for you, but you also get these slides with the link as well. It's this nice little website that links to data breaches all over the country. What it does is you put in your email address and then it scans its database of all of the breaches that have existed and tells you that email address has been vulnerable or has been leaked in whatever breaches that it has. And so this is a good check to see if you have accounts that you never thought you did have, or people signed up with your email address for something. This is a good check for you to know where your data was and how to, if you need to change your password. Because to prevent that, if your email does show up in data breaches, the recommendation is you change your password right away. Another thing that this website does is also here, I don't know how clearly it is for you, but if you go to this section where it's passwords, you actually can input your passwords and it will scan its database for any passwords that are similar to that. So it can also tell you if your password was ever leaked, because if your password was ever leaked, that means that attackers have a database of that information now. And so when they're scanning for and trying to create those passwords, their supercomputer doesn't have to do any work then. It just has to go through the combinations and find whatever password that finds a login information that matches that password. So if your password is ever breached, that password should never be used again. And then data encryption. So all of your devices need to be encrypted. By default, all your devices are, or at least iPhones are. Androids sometimes have to be turned on, at least the older devices did. The newer Samsungs, not so much, but the older devices, you had to go in and turn on data encryption. Then data encryption is basically jumbling all of your information where it still looks fine to you, but if anyone were to get access to your information from a remote party and doesn't have the password to decrypt your information, they wouldn't get anything. It's just a bunch of numbers and letters, and it's useless. So that's why we recommend encryption. If you have a company that has a larger, that does your own email servers or does their own storage servers or anything like that, those definitely need to be encrypted. But if you're smaller and you're using like Office 365 or you're using Gmail, that email is already defaulted to encrypted, so you're okay with that. That's more or less if you're large enough to have your own storage devices, and most small businesses in the 1 to employee range don't. So that's fine. Like if you use a CRM or you use anything online software, typically that's encrypted, but you want to double check. So if you go onto the website of the software that you're using, it can tell you if your data is being stored in, encrypted or not. Same thing with laptops. All of your devices should be encrypted. So laptops, desktops. If your Windows, well, actually any Windows device has an encryption called BitLocker, or encryption software on it called BitLocker that you can turn on. It will encrypt everything on your device, which is fantastic. BitLocker is a great encryption mechanism. However, you will generate a password, and that password will have to be inputted every time you log into your computer before you get to your login screen to actually log into Windows. This is to actually unlock the data on your laptop or desktop. If you ever forget password, you're kind of hosed at that point unless you have backup keys, because BitLocker does generate some backup keys that you are supposed to store somewhere that's not online in case you do forget your password. But if you don't have your backup keys and you don't have your password and your data is encrypted, there's no way that we can get it off. I mean, there's certain ways that we might be able to try, but I would say it's 50-50 shot if we can get your data back if you forget your password and you don't have backup keys with BitLocker. Same thing with Apple products, but it's not BitLocker, it's Firebolt. Time Machine is something else that we'll go over in a little bit. Firebolt is something that you can turn on Macs to encrypt your device as well. Other protection. So virtual private networks. Virtual private networks are basically networks that are virtual. So they take, in the event that you're ever at a coffee shop or somewhere that has public Wi-Fi, you should never transact business on public Wi-Fi. And that's because without a password, anybody can go in and an attacker can sit on that network and basically scan all of the devices that are connected to it, because there's no password, there's no encryption, there's nothing. So they can just scan for all their information that they want, and they can just pull it down and you'll never know that it's happening. With a VPN, it actually puts up a barrier around your devices. So if you have to use public Wi-Fi, then you turn on your VPN before you do anything, and then encrypts the channels between you and whatever sites you're trying to visit or whatever business transactions you're trying to do. So that way, if there is somebody sitting on that public network trying to get information, your data will always be encrypted. Not all VPNs are created equal though. So you want to make sure that you are getting a VPN that actually does encryption. Some VPNs don't actually do encryption, and they just do what we call masking of your IP address. So it just kind of makes it look like you're coming from somewhere else. So a lot of people use this if they're trying to, for example, if you're trying to access websites that maybe a government agency is not allowing you to use, you can turn on a VPN to make it look like you're coming from somewhere else to allow you into those websites. So a lot of people who are from foreign countries that can't get like Facebook, they'll turn on a VPN to say that they're theoretically in the United States, and then they can get access to Facebook. But again, just the masking doesn't mean that it's encrypted. So you want a VPN that does both, and all 4 of these options do both. So, and then protection with phishing. So I talk about phishing as being one of this attack methods to your employees. There's multiple different types. So you've probably heard of the email phishing. That's when you get an email It's usually recently it's about a package that has shipped and you need to click on this link to verify, or it's about somebody from accounting is trying to pay you money or in something and you need to click on this attachment to approve it. Most of them are off the wall and you can spot them. But if you get a little bit further in and an attacker actually wants you specifically, rather than to just sending out the same email to as many emails as they have, if they want to actually fit you specifically, that goes into the next attack method and goes into spear phishing, which is they actually customize the email address to you as a user. So they maybe did a little bit of recon on your Facebook profile or any social media profile and have gotten some personal information and or at least know a little bit more about you and put some personal detail in the email to make it more likely for you to click it. That's more, it's called spear phishing because it's more targeted. Then we have whaling, which is even more targeted, and usually through spear phishing tactics, they've already compromised one of your employees. And with whaling, they're going after like a high level target, like a CEO or CFO or someone who is able to approve large sums of money transactions and things like that. So whaling allows that to happen. Then you've got smishing, which is text message phishing. So those text messages that you get about a book offer or anything like that. It's usually links that you click and they steal your information. And then phishing, which is your voicemail phishing. That's when typically the IRS or Microsoft support calls you. I can guarantee you that IRS will never call you. They prefer a nice little snail mail. So in the event that you get a voice message or a phone call from somebody claiming to be something and they need you to pay them something or verify your identity, hang up and then call a number that you actually know of the company or the organization and then go through it. So that way, you know that you're talking to somebody that you're supposed to be talking to and not some random number who's able to spoof their phone number. A little phishing quiz that we have some of our clients do. It's powered by Google and Jigsaw. If you go to this link, it actually is a little website that'll kind of walk you through different phishing examples and how to train yourself. And we do recommend that you send your employees through this to identify that. And then protecting mobile devices. So mobile devices, a lot of people have, small businesses are doing the whole bring your own devices to work now. So rather than them providing devices, you get to bring your own. In the event that that happens, you need to mandate as a small business what is installed on them and what they have access to. So in order to do that, we recommend that you put in a mobile device management software on those devices. So if you are saying, so a lot of sales teams do this, if you are allowing people to use their devices to connect to your systems, to your CRMs, to input data, do anything like that, we recommend that you install what they call an MDM, which kind of allows you to dictate what device protections that device is allowed to have. So maybe salesman that doesn't have a passcode on their phone at all. If you install an MDM, then you say that they have to have a passcode, and so their phone basically sets up to where it will mandate that they have passcodes, or it will mandate that they have certain security protocols, or it will mandate that they have a VPN turned on whenever they're doing transactions. So it's just an added security for you to control devices that you might not necessarily get to control on a daily basis. And then business Wi-Fi. Business Wi-Fi is definitely more secure. Like Comcast and Verizon offer a business Wi-Fi class. We highly recommend that you go to a business Wi-Fi versus a residential or a personal Wi-Fi, just because of the added security features. Comcast specifically allows, you can add certain firewall securities or certain software securities to a business Wi-Fi that you wouldn't necessarily get from a residential Wi-Fi. So we recommend that you look into it. It's a little bit more expensive sometimes, but with the added security, it is better for your business. And I see the the Google Phishing Site link. I'll pull that after I finish talking. I don't have that one memorized because it's a long one. Step 3, detect, recognize if something is going wrong and stop it. So mainly for small businesses, the biggest thing is antivirus and anti-malware. You need to have some type of protection in place for you. So again, it's antivirus. It can be as simple as antivirus and anti-malware on all of your devices. The way that this software works is basically, so every file on a device has a fingerprint or has what we call a signature. And when a malicious piece of software or code gets onto your device, it has its own signature. And so what an antivirus and anti-malware software does is it has a whole database of bad files that it knows of. And it just constantly is scanning your system for any of those files. That's why updates are so important, because if you're not updating your antivirus, it's not updating its database, which means that any newer attacks or any newer pieces of code that are bad would not be in the system, which means that you would be saying that your system's fine, but technically it's not. So antivirus, anti-malware, definitely very important. There's McAfee, there's Norton, there's a lot of them out there. And we recommend that you go with one that is total protection, that has everything bundled together. That is usually easier, because if you buy them separately, in the old days, it used to be where if you bought them separately, they would actually try to identify each other as malicious and try to uninstall each other. So, but if you buy it all from one company and you buy it all in one neat package, that doesn't happen. If you're a company that's larger and has a lot more sensitive data, or has a lot more data that they have actual servers and things like that, we do recommend that you go to what we call a network intrusion detection software or an endpoint protection software. Those are just more advanced versions of detection. And if you are in that boat, have a conversation on what your best path forward for that is. So this is a pop-up that a lot of people often get. And if you're a small business and you use your laptop for personal as well, and maybe you have children at home or something like that, and they're on their website and they've not been trained on any of this, and they see this and they click this, most of the time this happens. A virus gets installed, or in this case, ransomware gets installed and encrypts all of your devices, or at least the device that it's on. And then all of your data is compromised, encrypted, and you have to pay money in order to get it. And this is usually an issue if you don't have anything backed up, because at this point your information is encrypted and you're not getting it back. You have backups, or you pay the ransom. If you pay the ransom, two things happen. One, the attacker does unlock your information, but you are basically telling the attacker that you'll pay that ransom, and you don't have any other way to get your data back, so they will just continually attack you and continually try to do this. Or two, they'll take your money and not decrypt your information. So neither one of them is a good option for you. So that's why we don't recommend you do anything. And we recommend that you leverage backups, and which takes me into the next section, which is respond. So how to plan for an incident. And this is, you need to make sure that you're having backups. In order to have backups, you need to know how many devices are impacted, how frequently you back up those, and are those backups version controlled. So backups are the only way to mitigate from loss of data in the event that you have ransomware and your devices get encrypted. And so there's two different versions of backups. You have what we call one continuously overwritten backup file, or you have what we would prefer you have is several version controlled backup files. And the difference between them is having one continuously overwritten backup file is better than nothing. But in the scenario that you you have an attack, or you click the link and installed malicious code on say a Tuesday, and you back up every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Well, you didn't know about the malicious code until Wednesday. Well, your overwritten backup would have just overwritten all of your files and now backed up the malicious code in your backup, making your backup pointless. With version control, you have backups separated by days. And so if you got the virus on Tuesday, Wednesday's backup happened, and now Wednesday's backup is unusable, but you still have Mondays, which is still clean and fresh to go back to. So you have maybe a day or two of data loss, but you don't have, you're not hosed in that situation. So we really highly recommend version control, and there's a few different ways to do this. You have different types of backups, which are full system backups, and you've also got file level backups, and you've got incremental backups. So full system is exactly what it sounds like. It backs up everything, including your system files, your user files, everything. You got file level backup, which actually backs up only the user generated files. So your pictures, your documents, those things. It does not care about system files. And then you've got incremental, which does a combination of both. It'll take a full system backup and then periodically scan your system for changing files and back up only the files that are changing. That's a way to save on storage space if you want to do the full system, but don't want to do a full system every time you back up. For anyone who is running Windows 8 or higher, there is a file level backup natively on Windows called File History. So you can turn that on and have it back up. You can't back up to your own hardware. So you'll have to have an external device that you plug in to back up to. File History will not let you back up on your own computer, because at that point it's kind of pointless if your whole system gets encrypted. Mac OS has the same thing, but they have a their software is full system versus file level, and it's called Time Machine. Then we got respond. So, well, we're in the respond section. So now you have backups, or at least you've identified how to back up, and you're kind of putting you're trying to get your data back up, and you're trying to respond to all of this. So you need to identify who is in your corner. So all the technical workers, digital forensic investigators, your IT people, your human resource personnel, legal representation. You need to identify all of these people and have them written down somewhere or something, so that way you know, in the event that a breach happens, you can respond quickly and mobilize all of these people as quickly as possible. The reason you need all of these people is because each person plays a different role. So your digital forensics investigators and your IT staff are going to be technical, and they're trying to figure out what happened and how they got in and all of that. Your human resource personnel and your legal representation are going to be people who are trying to identify what's your exposure and who is actually compromised and what you need to do with that exposure. Then you got respond. So, I mean, I keep saying then you got respond. No, we're all in response still. Then you have to figure out how to contain the event. So you've identified the system, you've identified how to protect it, or you've identified where they are, what systems are infected, what data is infected, and if you have backups for that data. In order to contain the event, you want to go around to all the systems that are infected and disconnect them from the network. Don't unplug them, don't power them off, actually just disconnect them from the outside world. And this can be as simple as turning off Wi-Fi or unplugging the network cable. The reason you don't want to turn them off is memory. If anyone knows what memory is, that's volatile information that gets stored when your computer is running, but the second it's turned off, that memory is destroyed, or that information is destroyed. So anything that is valuable to an investigator like myself that needs certain things, all of that would be destroyed and would not be able to be recovered. So that's why we recommend you unplug it, because at least that's still sitting in memory and we can capture that memory, versus if it's turned off, it's gone. And then you need to know where a digital forensics investigator is, and or how to identify how you can get one. Digital forensics investigators are the people who come in afterwards. Some actually do both, a mixture of incident response and investigation. And so they come in afterwards and figure out how it was taken, what they can do to get your information back, or what your next steps are. Your IT staff, if you have an external, internal IT staff, they are not actually, they don't think like this. Like I said, cybersecurity is a catch-all term. IT does not, IT is a branch, and they're handling making sure you're up and running on a day-to-day basis. They're not skilled in all of the different techniques and avenues that you would need in order to investigate something like this. So that's why there is a separation. Then lastly, step 5 is recover. So you've responded to the attack, you've gotten them out, you've identified how that happened, you've done all you need to do to actually get them out of the system and now you're ready to start recovering. So you're starting to run your backups and get your systems back online. So you're starting to put the pieces together. So you've identified who you need to call, you've documented all of the things that happened and how to prevent those in the future. You're managing your brand, so you're keeping the public informed. You're being timely and open and honest and accurate about what you're saying. The worst thing you can do is keep customers in the dark. Now, you don't have to provide every piece of information that's happening, because I will tell you, in the event of an investigation, things change. We might say something happened and then a day later have more information to say that that's not necessarily how it happened. This is how it happened. So you don't want to necessarily inform the public all of the time, but you need to inform them that a data breach did happen. We're investigating it. We're doing everything we can to ensure that your information is secure and identifying how it was taken and so on and so forth. But don't update them about every little thing. And then legal responsibilities. In the event of a data breach, sometimes you have to, most of the time you have to report it to either a state agency or, depending on the size, a government agency. And so going to your legal accounting or legal attorney for that and identifying who you have to notify is important. And then lessons learned. I already a little bit talked about this a little bit. You need to learn from your mistakes. Maybe it's not even a mistake. Maybe it was just something that just happens, because data breaches do just happen. It could very well not be your fault. It could have been an update that you ran that just happened to have a leak in it, and someone got access to it. So it's not always your fault, but you need to be able to identify what happened and document that, so that way you know what to do in the future. And then identifying your state and local resources help you recover faster, such as FBI field offices. There's FBI offices in every state, and there is a cybercrime unit in all of them, and they really are out there to help, and they will actually do some implementation for you. So identifying your FBI field offices is very important. All right, so that was it. That was a lot. Hopefully you got some good information. This was a crash course on cybersecurity and the basics that you need to know as a small business, but the workbook that is available to you on New Hampshire's website, please download that and take a look. It does this plus more stuff I wasn't able to cover in this video, but your SBDC consultants have been trained on all of it. So please ask them questions, ask me questions. My email's there in the link. If you're a business that needs help, I am here to help you in any way that I can. So that's it. That's all I had.